All right, we're here as the Lost Rider Podcast. Good morning and welcome to the second half of this week's News from the Camp House. This also comes out now on the LostRiderPodcast.com. So you can go look at any of these programs that we've done in the last year and a half or so, and they will be on the LostRiderPodcast.com if you want reference to some of these interviews from the past. And okay, one of the big things, and we were alluding to this in the first half, is public trust. And that's where anybody in the field of public service is responsible for public trust, whether it's a state senator, whether it's executive director of a river authority, whether it's TCEQ, whoever it is responsible for public trust. And, right now, public trust, my outlook on that is at an all-time low. And it's you can blame it on COVID. You can blame it on, whoever you want to blame it on. But we got to do something to get good information out there so the public trusts people. And, am I not correct on that general idea?
Yes. It has gotten really difficult to get the full story across in an accurate format that's transparent and remains transparent as it's being published. Yes.
All right. Now, part of my problem here where I'm sitting doing what I do is, okay, what do I do? I've got the radio deal here. I try to get information out to people. The other thing is I'm chairman of the Texas Outdoor Writers Association. I try to get, other outdoor writers who I feel are responsible for this type of natural resource reporting to do it. And let's look at what we have. We've got 5 state agencies that have conservation programs. I've had 4 of those agencies at our conferences. I can't even get an interview out of TCEQ. They either don't return my calls, or when I do talk to them, little communications director lady says, this information is too technical to do an interview. And I asked her, I said, is it too technical for you to explain or too technical for me to understand? Because I'm pretty well betting I can understand it and I can translate it to my listeners. And, I didn't get an answer on that. At the same time, you look at the Texas Gulf Coast, it is completely covered with refineries and chemical companies. You got good actors, you got bad actors. When you got TCEQ that won't even give you an interview to talk about this stuff, it makes it tough when you're a new kid on the block with a desal plant that we've been needing for 30 years, but people are worried about it. They're worried about the bays and estuaries. They're worried about their fishing. Meanwhile, they're drinking recycled water in town. None of that makes sense, but it's just the information that people get. So, bless y'all's heart for trying to be transparent on the internet. But, we've got, when it comes to public trust, we've got to crack that egg on TCEQ and again, bless your heart and bless Ken Britton over at Corpus Christi. Everybody talks to me over there. Everybody tries to tell me what I think is pretty much up front and straight. But there's some other ones here really dragging their feet. Whether we're talking about the legislature or state or TCEQ, that's where public trust starts suffering.
We've got a lot of smart people at the TCEQ, a lot of good, hardworking, smart people that run that place. And I guess from what I'm hearing you say is they're having trouble trying to convey their message, and convey what they're doing. But I will say this for TCEQ, they do a really good job, Herman, in what they're charged to do.
Mm-hmm.
And, there are some violators, but if you look at their monthly agendas, it is full of fines that they're assessing or concerns that they have with certain industries or certain companies that are discharging that maybe didn't quite make the parameters for a given month, and they're pretty rough on us. And you know what? I think that's what it takes to make a good regulatory agency, is for them to be fair and impartial all the way through, and unfortunately, I guess from what I'm hearing you say, they don't have the great PR that they need, to tell the story of what they do. But
Right.
From my perspective, they do a great job in what they're tasked.
Well, they would have to. I would think they would have to. And I pointed this out the whole time I've had this. I pointed it out. You can go to Port Arthur. You can drive right through a refinery, and on the back side of it's National Wildlife Refuge, where you can catch redfish, trout, go duck hunting, do all that. It's clean water 100 yards behind the refinery. So I said, somebody's doing something right. But if they had enough sense to talk about it and show it to the public, they would. This public trust, you wouldn't have problems with detractors and everything else with, trying to implement technology in the future.
Well, I agree with that. We probably all need to do a better job in telling the story and keeping our story in front of the general public, so that transparency radiates just like the negative.
And I would also put this on the state senators and the representatives in these different places to stand up and show that. And when they go to a deal, and they start talking about, well, we're not going to let boys in the girls' restrooms. That carries about as much weight as chasing the coons out of your attic and plugging the hole. That takes no brains at all. What takes a little bit of brains is going, hey, look, we got this technology. We're going to solve Texas water problems, and we're going to show you how we're going to do it. That's what the public needs. Not this dumb stuff.
I agree. And from my perspective, that's going on. I mean, I've got to be in a meeting in Wessico of the House Natural Resources Committee meeting.
Okay.
It's a preliminary hearing, and I'm going down for that. And that's where those kind of things take place. You've got state representatives. I know the guys from our area, Todd Hunter, there's just a lot of them, but we work a whole lot with Chairman Hunter out of the Corpus Christi area. Those people are really smart people, and they do a great job of doing just what you're talking about, and trying to grow the water industry and trying to make sure that Texas has enough water supply to meet the growing demand.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently that is just not radiating to the general public, though.
Well, say like for instance, we had a conversation, an interview one day, and we were talking about the South Texas Water Authority and them wanting to put in a desal plant on a brackish aquifer in Kingsville, and everybody down there was worried about Baffin Bay because their first inclination was to put it in a treat it and put it back in the creek and let it run down to Baffin Bay. Everybody's scared about Baffin Bay. Everybody was saying, it's going to be too salty. You can't do that to Baffin Bay. And then turned around and Parks and Wildlife said it. Different ones said it. And then I got to the CCA and they said, we're scared it's going to be too fresh. And I'm like, holy mackerel, you just do, and you can go back and look at the tapes, and that's exactly what happened. And I'm going, the public is not getting the story. And I know we've talked before that you can treat this water and make it be whatever it needs to be when you put it back in the bay and let it run back to the bay. You can make that water be whatever it be, but you got to have the public trust that will happen. and that the oversight is there. And for that, you have to have TCEQ come out and talk to you, and they ain't doing it.
I would agree that was a kind of a botched program there on that return to Baffin Bay, that brackish water discharge. And, that's a hypersaline body of water anyway, Baffin Bay is. It's one that's in peril. It's impacted by heavy nutrient loading and those kind of things. And it just wasn't going to survive if that would have taken place. I would agree. Finally, but the good news is that it did prevail. The objections to that did prevail, and that is not being allowed. So good on the public for getting out and making sure that their voices were heard on that thing, because they did defeat that proposal.
All right, but now what we're talking about is if they could have made that water be just whatever the science says it needs to be, if they could have treated it and let it run back to Baffin Bay, you wouldn't have had a problem. Now what they decided, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, they decided to put this down reinjection wells. Okay, so what happens when you put it down reinjection wells forever and ever? You go out to the Permian Basin and look at these orphan wells and look at these places where some of this frack water's coming back out of the ground. That's not the answer. You got to be able to treat it and do something with it besides just pump it back in the ground.
I agree. And there are people that have that type of technology that can take that and use the brine and the minerals and some of the things in that brine for good industrial purposes, and give you clean water.
And they did it. They did that at the Brine Mound in 1984. They took the bromides and the chlorides out of that discharge when they created the Brine Mound Strategic Oil Reserve. And I mean, they've been doing it since 1984. So we've got the technology to do it,
It's all a matter of a dollar, I mean, how much money are people willing to spend to treat water to drinkable form?
Okay.
And we are there. We are at that brink right now where water in the future is going to cost a great deal more than it's costing today.
All right, but it's going to be there. That's the point.
Amen.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right. Okay. I'll tell you what, we could do this all morning. I think we got some of our points out. So I appreciate you being with us again.
Great conversation, Herman. Thank you for asking us, and we'll look forward to doing it one more time.
You bet.
In the future.
Well, we'll do it again, and as this project progresses, and hopefully, everything goes smooth, and we can look forward to a new source of fresh water down there around Corpus.
It's coming. Thank you, sir.
All right. Hang on just a second. Folks, I hope you enjoyed this weekend's edition, News from Camp House. Hope you learned something. And now y'all go out. This weekend's edition is also brought to us by Shaw's Bend Country Club. Country Club folks who don't have a country club. Now, go out, have a fun weekend, be safe, and y'all just remember, pretty much any day is sure a good day to be out in the woods.